We're sort of stable at this number. Should we go ahead?
Yes.
Okay, let's start. Hello, welcome. My name is Marcia Saxton. This is the final workshop of the Transportation Resiliency, Accessibility, and Climate Sustainability Project, collaboration between the World Institute on Disability and the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. Our sponsor is the California Department of Transportation, Caltrans. Our theme is ensuring access is everyone's job. And this particular focus is for the disability community. Last week we had a workshop similar to this, but it was for the transportation community, transportation managers and people interested in improving from the MTC side. So I'd like to briefly introduce a few people. We have several panel members, but right now I'm just going to introduce Drennan Shelton and Shimon Israel from the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. Hello. Kat Zygmunt is my coworker at the World Institute on Disability. And then we're going to proceed. Next. Today's agenda for our focus is quick introductions. We're going to briefly review TRACS projects, deliverables, talk about our goals, talk about our outreach efforts and findings. We have speakers. And we're going to address the issue of transportation advocacy and our call to action. Next. This is who we are, a 2.5-year research policy analysis and public education initiative to improve collaboration between transportation agencies and people with disabilities in the 9-county San Francisco Bay Area, which includes Alameda, Contra Costa, Marin, Napa, San Francisco, San Mateo, Santa Clara, Solano, and Sonoma. And I realized I wanted to thank Lori, our real-time captioner, and speak a little more slowly. Thank you, Lori. This project is funded through the Sustainable Communities Focus of Caltrans, the Senate Bill 1 grant program. And we want to thank Caltrans for your commitment to accessibility for people with disabilities. Okay. Our achievements of this 2.5-year project include the creation and participation of our Policy Advisory Board, who are local people in the 9 counties who have contributed their knowledge and expertise and helped guide our process. We are in the midst of the last completion of our research and our documents, which we'll soon be posting on the website at the World Institute on Disabilities site. We've conducted a number of community workshops and events over the 2 years. And this, our final workshop and our dissemination of resources, is the culmination of this project. Thanks. And our goals today are, as our final workshop, to offer a summary of our outreach process and our findings. Our slogan is around addressing the issue of transportation advocacy. Our slogan is ensuring access is everyone's job, including people with the disability community and the transportation community. And we're going to have some time for a sky's the limit brainstorm for future transportation ideas and imaginings and dreams and a call to action. Okay. That's yours, Drennan. Go for it.
Yes. So to begin with, we wanted to tell you about our outreach efforts for this project. Our goal was to gather key transportation-related themes in the lives of people with disabilities that affect all areas of daily life, like employment, housing, socializing, and medical needs. At the outset of the project, we established an advisory group that provided guidance and input throughout the project. This group reviewed our project deliverables, helped to identify opportunities for outreach, and reviewed our findings. The group was made up of activists, advocates, independent living center staff, transportation providers, and emergency services. The first type of outreach we conducted was one-on-one interviews. The WID staff conducted 13 in-depth interviews in private settings that allowed participants to give personal anecdotal information on their experiences. 11 of the interviews were with people with disabilities, and 2 were with transportation providers. The second type of outreach we conducted was focus groups. WID and NTC staff conducted 5 focus groups around the region. These consisted of small group meetings with people with disabilities, as well as a few caregivers, disability experts, and transportation providers. The small group atmosphere allowed participants to give personal and anecdotal information about their experiences and allowed participants to build upon each other's stories and ideas for improvement. While all of the focus groups included participants with varying types of disabilities, one of the focus groups was made mainly of people with visual impairments. Third, we hosted 2 workshops on barriers within the existing transportation systems and how best to make changes. The first workshop focused on transportation professionals, those involved in making decisions about our transportation systems. And the audience for the second workshop focused on people with disabilities, disability advocates, and those who represent the disability community. Last, WID developed and distributed an online survey to reach a broader range of stakeholders in our region. There were a total of 375 respondents. They were asked about disability type, vehicle access, and use of transportation modes. Additionally, respondents were asked about specific factors related to their fixed route transit and paratransit use. The population of all of our participants was diverse with respect to disability, age, income level, race, and geography. The types of disabilities included mobility impairments, hearing impairments, vision impairments, chronic illness and pain, and developmental disabilities. Intersectional categories with respect to disability included people with multiple disabilities, disabled parents, parents of disabled children, and seniors with a wide range of age-related impairments. The age of our participants ranged from 22 to 81, and our participants came very close to reflecting that of the Bay Area, including approximately 40% people of color and languages spoken other than English. Our participants were from a range of income levels and lived throughout the Bay Area. So now I'll turn it back to Marcia, who will run us through what it is we heard from you.
Okay, this is the crux of the this is the outcomes and the specifics of the feedback we've gotten from the disability community. So it's structured in terms of different categories, whether it's the type of transportation, the vehicle, the issues that emerge. So for fixed through, which is buses, trains, it's really important that we engage the disability community early in taking input. And this is the biggest challenge and outcome and emphasis for today, is we need to create this engagement, this connection, this communication between the disability community and the transportation agencies and MTC people. So infrastructure issues, that's the built environment. People spoke of the lack of signage and auditory guidance, especially if there's some kind of disruption, repair, and so on. The elevators, really big deal when you have to, move through inches of urine. The elevators broken down, delays, not getting adequate information ahead of time, so you don't even know what station you can use. These kinds of things are really, really challenging. The next category is driver training issues. Not acceptable to pass up people in wheelchairs at stops for whatever reason. That was a significant complaint and truly an outrage. There are sometimes safety failings related to lifts, securement, tie downs, and not giving enough time for people with disabilities to be seated safely. And sometimes drivers are not skilled or trained dealing with other passenger issues, such as rude passengers not respecting disabled seating and so on. And then the issue of the conflicting needs regarding accessibility, sometimes the accommodation for one individual with a disability requires circumstances that may not work for somebody else. And there's not clear solutions sometimes. So that's an ongoing issue for input, for negotiation, for thinking on the spot about what's going to work for those individuals who may have somewhat conflicting needs. Okay. Paratransit, big issues. For those of you who are paratransit users, you know what we're talking about. There are unclear and difficult eligibility process for the application, the huge challenges of scheduling and delays, you know, if things change, like a flight or a doctor's appointment, which may often change. How do you handle that need for quick response and renegotiating and rescheduling? The regional trips across the county lines, the transfer trips, the different jurisdictions may result in hours-long waits. There are issues around curb-to-curb problems where individuals with disabilities are picked up somewhere and then dropped off somewhere without appropriate assistance to where they're going, you know, into their home that may be, you know, a ways away. The community of parents with disabilities and parents of disabled children are poorly served. There are not clear regulations. It's unclear sometimes what the roles of the drivers are. Parents may be carrying a lot of things, you know, the baby seat, the diaper bag, and so on, and holding hands of children, wheelchairs. That needs to be addressed and clarified. And yes, there are huge disparities across the providers. There are many different kinds of agencies, even within one county. And so learning the rules, and negotiating, creating policy that works across these disparities is a huge challenge. With regard to private transportation, we're still hugely struggling with the lack of wheelchair accessible cabs and ride-hail services. It's still very expensive. And so the cost as well as the accessibility are big challenges. Okay, now we're going to go on to the TNCs. Over to you, Brennan.
Yeah, so we wanted to take this opportunity to update you that there may soon be an increase in private accessible ride-hail services. So back in 2018, the governor signed into law the TNC Access for All Act. TNC stands for Transportation Network Companies, which are those app-based ride-hail services like Uber and Lyft. The law made the California Public Utilities Commission responsible for implementing a program for TNC wheelchair accessible service. Under this program, transportation network companies have been charging customers a 10-cent per ride fee. And all of these fees are being deposited in county-based pots called access funds. And those funds will be spent in the county where the trip originated. Both Uber and Lyft have been starting or increasing their wheelchair accessible services around the state. But in the next year, we're going to see an increase in these services with more providers as those access funds start to be spent. And you can find more information about this program on the California Public Utilities Commission's website, which is cpuc.ca.gov/TNC Access. You can also search for TNC Access for All, and you'll be able to find the California Public Utilities Commission's website where they'll talk about that. Okay, so let's change gears a little bit. We've got a couple of presentations for you. Our speakers will talk to their experience working with or through advisory boards and councils. We'll have a Q&A session for our speakers when they're done speaking, so feel free to type questions into the Q&A box as we go. First, we have Annette Williams. Annette has directed accessible services at the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency since 1990. Her team is responsible for accessibility to SFMTA's fixed route system, which includes trolley and diesel bus, light rail, historic streetcars, and the cable car services. Her office manages the contract for San Francisco Paratransit, and she's also responsible for overseeing accessible design and review for transportation-related capital projects for public transit, bicycle, parking, and pedestrian access in the public right-of-way. Annette, thanks for being here. Take it away.
Thank you. It's nice to see. I don't know if you guys can see me. It's always crazy with these screens. Nice to see some people that I know on the list of participants and people who've worked with us actually in terms of advisory committees. What Drennan and Marcia asked me to do was just to talk about how input from people with disabilities and older adults or seniors is crucial to our success in terms of really having services that meet the needs of these groups. Next slide, please. For those of you who aren't familiar with MTA, one of the kind of unique things about San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency is that we not only run the public transit system, but we also, and paratransit, but we also manage a lot of the other transportation functions. And so it gives us no excuse in terms of getting things to coordinate and work together. For instance, we oversee the taxi regulation, as well as bike lanes, bike share, car share. So and all of the streets, parking, audible signals, all of those kinds of things. So we should have a better chance at getting them to work together. Next slide, please. Just to talk a little bit about our main advisory committees in terms of disabled access and access for seniors. We have the Paratransit Coordinating Council, which has been around more than 40 years and has really been instrumental over that period of time in making sure that we have a paratransit system that meets the needs, not only meeting the law in terms of what the ADA requires, but also meeting the needs of our customers and San Franciscans. So that committee meets about every 6 weeks. And then we also have subcommittees for each mode of service. We have taxi, SF Access, which is more of the traditional ADA van service, and group van. And what's, I think, somewhat unique about our committee is that we have a lot of participation by stakeholders, people with disabilities and agencies that serve people with disabilities and seniors, but also drivers and providers, so that we're able to, you know, get down into the nitty-gritty, especially in these subcommittees, about policies and procedures and what actually happens out there on the street. So I think that's been really important. We also have the Multimodal Accessibility Advisory Committee that advises us on all the other MTA related programs. Mainly it's Muni, but also in terms of bike lanes or parking or some of our other policies, the MAC committee is also involved in those as well. Next slide, please. Drennan asked me to just give a little bit of background on disability advocacy and history. And I think probably most of you on the call know this, you know, as well as anyone. So I won't spend a lot of time, but for anyone who may not be as aware of, you know, what's happened in terms of disability advocacy, you know, we are only where we are right now because of advocates and because of people with disabilities who, you know, really put themselves on the line to push for accessibility. And I'm sure most people are aware that back in the in the early 70s, the 504 regulations were passed. And part of that said that people with disabilities could not be discriminated against in programs that were funded with federal dollars. But what happened was nothing. That was in that legislation, but then there had not been any regulations to put out how is that going to be followed through on. And there was a lot of frustration on the part of people in the disability community. And there were demonstrations across the country in 1977. And the largest one was in San Francisco. And there was a sit-in, 28-day sit-in. I highly recommend checking out the movie Crip Camp if you haven't seen it. It's on Netflix. And it gives a lot of this history and kind of the backstory of what happened in, you know, many groups of people with disabilities prior to that helped that movement and that work. After that, they did adopt regulations under 504, and that then was called local option, where transit agencies, in terms of transit, where transit agencies could decide whether to either do paratransit, van and taxi, or van services, or fixed route accessibility, lifts on buses and other measures to make the fixed route system accessible. And I think there still was not a lot of action. You know, I think only California and Michigan had state laws that required lifts on buses for all new buses that were purchased, but there was still not a lot happening. And that led to the ADA. And obviously the ADA addresses much more than just transportation. But I think transportation was one of the frustrations that people with disabilities had, that there still were not seeing, you know, good accessibility and ability to get around. And it's very hard to participate if you don't have access in transportation. So next slide, please. This just shows you some old photographs that we have back from our early days of accessibility. You can see Art Agnos, our earlier mayor. And there are descriptions of all of these pictures that Drennan has distributed to people who have vision impairments. I'm going to quickly go over explaining them, but there are alt text descriptions. And this was, you know, one of our early buses, kind of a, what do you call it, ribbon cutting. And our 2 times before now light rail vehicles, the Boeing vehicles. Since then, we've had the Breda, and now we have the Siemens. And some other examples of things where the disability community have really worked with us in terms of accessibility. In the lower left side, there's a picture of a manual ramp being deployed from our F-line streetcars. These are the historic streetcars to a wayside platform. Next slide, please. So when I think about some of the really important factors in terms of working together with people in the disability community and listening and hearing and making and taking actions, one of the important things is building relationships, because not only is it important for people who are working in the transit agencies to really have ongoing relationships with people with disabilities so they understand things, but vice versa, so that there's a level of trust there, and it makes it much easier to move forward. And I think even more importantly is having people with disabilities in positions in transit agencies, you know, themselves as planners and managers. And, you know, that's always the best way to get input, because then you're getting it all the time. But those relationships, I think, are really important. Another thing that comes up a lot is inches matter, you know, geometry matters. And one of the things is, it's one thing to say, oh, it needs to be 30 inches wide, but it's much different to actually try it out with people and figure out, well, how do you get to that 30-inch wide space? And what does it take in terms of a, you know, a manual chair versus a power chair versus all? And we found that we've gotten so much information from actually working and trying things out and seeing what works and what doesn't work. It's really important to do that in the real world. And then the third thing I think is really crucial is finances. You know, we can't really get projects done if we don't have the funding to do it. And often, you know, we come in late in terms of accessibility, or we're not consulted early enough. And when new funding measures are contemplated, we need to be advocating for accessibility and for the needs of seniors and people with disabilities. And I know many of you have, I know Bob Planhold has, I know Pyra, and I'm sure many of the others of you that I don't know as well who are from other counties, that, you know, having the funding to be able to follow through makes a big difference. Next slide. So I just wanted to talk about a few kind of examples of things where input from the disability community was so crucial to getting something that worked well. I don't know if you all remember back in the early days when they first started doing low floor buses, the ramp just started at the door and went, you know, straight out from there. And it wasn't very long. And so what this meant was it could work okay at a curb, you know, if you were at a 6-inch curb, because there wasn't too much of a slope between the bus when it was kneeled and the ramp that was at the curb. But if you had to deploy the ramp in the street, it was almost impossible to get up. You know, if someone was trying to go up in their wheelchair, often they would be up on 2 wheels. And this wasn't something the bus manufacturers were that concerned about until we really said, you know, this doesn't work. There's always going to be cases where someone needs to get on from the street. Obviously, it's more ideal to get on from the curb, but we need to design a ramp that works better in all circumstances. So one of the answers was this one, which is a bifold. There are 2 pictures of different people in wheelchairs, Marina and Roland Wong, using a bifold ramp that provided then longer length so that the slope was not as steep. Another ramp design included the ramp surface all the way into the vehicle so that you had the length all the way from the fare box to the street, and that made it work better. Next slide, please. Another example is securement areas. When bus manufacturers originally started making buses, they generally put the securement area right next to each other. And if you try to think about how you get into a securement area, if you're having to turn around, if there's another wheelchair user right next to you, it's very difficult. But if you stagger the securement areas and you have longer distance in each securement area, it makes it much easier to make those kinds of maneuvers. And so in terms of our bus specs, we always stagger the 2 wheelchair securement areas so that it's easier for people to navigate. And that really came from, you know, trying with many different people and different types of chairs, how it worked in terms of the real world. Next slide, please. Another example was one of our advisory committee members, Jewel McGinnis, who's pictured here, you know, said, when I want to make a complaint or I want to give a compliment to a driver, I don't want to have to ask the driver what the bus number is. I want to be able to get that on my own independently. And so we came up with a little, I guess you'd call it like a plate that we put behind the operator at 60 inches on all of our vehicles that has in raised letters, the number, as well as in Braille, so that someone can find out the number of the bus without having to ask another passenger or the driver. Next slide, please. This next slide just shows a few pictures of some of the things that we've done over the years with our advisory committee. One was having a single flip-up seat. You know, normally you have 3 flip-up seats for a wheelchair user, but a single flip-up seat can be really helpful for someone who has a walker. So they then could flip that seat up and put their walker in that position and get it out of the street, out of the aisleway, and that's helpful to them. Another is our manual bridge that we have that bridges from wayside platforms into our historic streetcars. And we tried that out with many different people with disabilities to come up with a very simple design, but that works well and gives people access to these historic cars. You know, some of our advisory committee members grew up in San Francisco and saw these cars drive by every day and were never able to get on them. So it's wonderful to be able to use a vehicle, as well as obviously the transportation getting from point A to point B, but being able to get on these different historic cars. Another thing that we did was like the stop request feature for the light rail vehicles. Generally, it's underneath the seat. This is the specific one for needing the wayside platform. But if you're an ambulatory person and want to get off there, it's not convenient to get it under the seat. So we added another stop request specifically for the wayside platforms on the Modesty panel. And then we're in the process of putting in new decals in the metro stations, which will show where the front door on the light rail front door first car, because when someone's going out into the surface, that's the door that you want to be in when you exit. Like our new line, the 3rd Street line is accessible at all doors, but out on the surface where the system was built in the early 1900s, the stops are only accessible at key stations with wayside platforms. Next slide, please. Another thing that I wanted to mention is emerging mobility, and I talked about it a little bit in the beginning, or maybe that was before our call, in that, as many of you know, probably about 1.5 years or 2 years ago, a whole bunch of scooters were, and I would say, dumped on the streets of San Francisco, and people were leaving them everywhere, leaving them in the middle of path of travel, which was having really significant impacts on seniors and people with disabilities. And so we were able to put into place a permitting program, and part of that permitting program was very clearly to lay out parking guidelines. And that we got input from people with disabilities on in terms of what makes most sense. And what we came up with is tethering. It's requiring those scooters to be tethered to a bike rack or a pole, so that that's even more likely that they're going to not be in the main path of travel, as well as having very strict enforcement requirements where the companies are fined when scooters are not parked appropriately. And then we've also started on a new adaptive scooter, which is part of the permitting process, where each permitted company has to provide also a pilot for adaptive scooters. And so we're looking at how can these scooters be more usable by people with disabilities. And we did a survey, and we've gotten feedback on having a basket. It's helpful, having 3 wheels. As you can see in the lower picture on the left side, I'll explain, there's a more like a tricycle where you can stand or you can sit, and it's got much better balancing in terms of the if someone was to stand on it. And so we're looking at these different types of scooters that may make it more possible for people to use a scooter that couldn't use the more traditional, just small two-wheeled scooter. We also have worked on a pop-up for adaptive bicyclists in Golden Gate Park. It's going to start up again, hopefully this spring, where people with disabilities could come and try out adaptive cycles, like a tandem cycle, side-by-side tandem, hand trike, a bunch of different types, and BORP, which works very closely with us in the East Bay, is going to be helping people with sizing and making sure that they get the right bicycle for them. And we did this pre-COVID as well, but we're going to continue it after that. And I think that another area of emerging mobility is TNCs, and Drennan talked a little bit about that, but we've been very strongly advocating with the disability community for accessible TNC services, and working with the CPUC on that implementation of the Access Fund. Now, since July 2019 already, as time's just flying with COVID, it's like that disappeared. They've been collecting 10 cents on every trip, which is going into an Access Fund, some of which is being used by the TNCs for accessibility, but if it's not all being used, it's going to be available throughout the state for accessible TNC type services. Next slide. Just one last thing I wanted to mention is with COVID, we've gone through lots of changes, and Muni service was reduced some, and we were really concerned about seniors and people with disabilities being able to do their essential trips, even if the bus line was further away than it had been. So we implemented the Essential Trip Card program, and that really came out of all the work that had been done by consumers and the managers of the program prior to work out any problems that we had with the existing paratransit program that used a taxi debit card. So because of that, we were able to stand up this program in about 3 weeks' time, which I'm sure we never would have been able to do without all the work that had been done prior. And so now we have about 3,200 seniors and people with disabilities in San Francisco who are using this card to do their essential trips, maybe a medical trip or a shopping trip during COVID. Next slide. So another thing I think is really important is celebrating the work and thanking advisors, because it's a lot of work and it takes a commitment for people. And one of our PCC members said, we should be having a appreciation luncheon every year. And so we've been doing that for quite a few years now. And we usually try to go to a museum, get a docent tour, and have a lunch, and get a chance to foster those relationships, outside of all the work that we do, but to really build on those relationships. So next slide, so there's my contact information. And then also in the following slide is links to our website, to different parts of our website in terms of accessibility. So I really appreciate your having me here. I know there's a number of other speakers, and I want to make sure I don't take up too much time, but I'm more than willing to take questions. And I think there are a few in the chat that I haven't had a chance to look at yet.
That's okay, Annette. We'll get to the questions when Ernest is finished. So a reminder to our attendees, if you have questions, don't worry about waiting. Just go ahead and put them into the Q&A box. But next we have Ernest Rogers. Ernest is the chair of the Solano Paratransit Coordinating Council and is a member of the Solano County Coordinated Transportation Service Agency Advisory Committee. He's worked in a variety of initiatives and programs focused on youth mentorship, and currently works with inmates at San Quentin as a sponsor in leadership training and assisting individuals who are getting ready to return home. Ernest was born with osteogenesis imperfecta and is a public transit user. Ernest, thanks for being with us today. Take it away.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here with you guys. And as you heard all the good news, to me it was good news because I've been disabled all my life. And to tell you that growing up in an area where there's no public transportation for people with disabilities, it's amazing. I grew up in the South, a little town called Tallulah, about 15,000, rough streets, everything, you know, nothing was there at my time was anything just was ADA accessible. I went to college. To go to my class, I had to go up about 7 flights of stairs. Not 7 flights, about 4 flights of stairs. But I couldn't do it because I was in a wheelchair, so I had to depend on my buddies that play football to carry me up. Good thing I was small at the time. I got a little bigger now, so that kind of hurts. But what I want to talk to you about is what made me angry, and I'm gonna tell you the reason why I've used the term angry. Because sometimes you had to get mad to get something right, or to want to speak out. And what made me angry was the fact that I could see all these people going around doing what they want to do, and they just as capable as I am. They might not have disabilities or whatever, but we all wanted the same things, and I wanted some things too. One of the reasons why I'm in California, and I'm glad I'm in the Bay Area, is because I heard so much great things about Berkeley being the access capital of the United States back in the 70s and the 60s, because you saw about the demonstrations. But there was changes that need to be made, still need to be made. In 1990, they came out with the ADA law, which had a lot of good things in it, but we became the policeman of it. And so we need to make changes. Now, how do we make changes? Is one of the questions I like to ask you. Because after you get upset and you get angry, what can I do to change it? Don't just hold the anger, because you need to channel it to be productive. It's not only about us getting to and from places. It's about the people that are behind us. Those that come, the younger generation, the other younger children, that they don't need to see their disability as a holdup or something that can stop them from achieving the goals that they want to achieve. So one of the things I found out, because of my nice personality, is that if you make friends with people, all types of people, one of the things that came out in one of the slides is make friends with the transportation agency. And what I did once I started riding the buses here in California, I started talking to the drivers and speaking to them. And once they saw me and they found out I was a friendly person, then I could get little things done, you know, maybe a free ride, you know, but maybe a pickup, not necessarily on the curb, because I couldn't get on the curb maybe, but maybe on the street. So I had to make that kind of, so one of the things I want to talk about is how to make friends. I mean, a lot of people are sympathetic to us. We need to be aware of it. Don't be proud. Sometimes I find myself being too proud to ask people to help. And then it makes my journey harder. But I found out that the more I asked, the easier it got. And the more friends I made. Because people start seeing you as a person when they talk to you and when they get to know you. So those are the changes that can be made. And with all the agencies, the reason why I became a member of the Solano County Paratransit was I got stuck coming from Concord one night at, what time was it? About 8 a.m. And I got to the Concord station, and I realized that the Vallejo bus didn't come to the Concord station at that time. So I had to catch the 80 route from Concord all the way around to El Cerrito del Norte. When I got to East El Cerrito del Norte, I made it to the last bus, the last 80. It's now about 9:30 at night. So I'm riding through Vallejo, and just so happened that night I had to get sick. So here I am coming to Vallejo, and my home is not downtown where the main stop is. It's about 3 miles away. And it's at 10 o'clock at night. Not that many traffic lights. And I had to ride home in my power chair at night without any lights. And I'm out there sick. And I'm up there and I'm upset. I'm saying, why the bus couldn't run just a little later? Why this and why that? And so when I got home, it just so happens in a week or so, I received a pamphlet, and the pamphlet talked about coming to a paratransit meeting. I went, and I told them my story. And I told him, how would you like to be out there that time of night? And I'm small and it's dark outside. I forgot what colors I was. I ain't had no lights on my chair and the streets were dark. It was just a mess, but they sympathized. And they asked me, could I come back? So I started going to the meeting, then I joined the panel. By joining the panel, we were able to make so many changes. Right now, we have a system where if you do get left at the bus stop at night, we have a system now where we have a faith in action. You can call a couple of agencies and they have vans that can come pick you up and take you home if you're that late. But see, that never would have happened if I didn't make friends. It never would have happened if I hadn't have been there and said and spoke my voice. You don't have to be rude, but you do have to let them know that you mean business and that the customer. See, I graduated in business administration, and one of the things I found out, a lot of people say the best thing a business guy is his product. No, that's not the best thing a guy. The best thing a business guy is the way it looks. No. The thing that makes a business important is the people. Who you work with, who you reach out to, and how you respond to your customers. Because if your customers don't come, you don't make no money. And that's one of the things I found out. So people are an important aspect. And see, we can't get things done because people don't know what they need to do for us. I've been in places. It's funny. I had a guy bring a wheelchair to my house. Now I'm 4 feet tall. Well, 3'11". And the guy bought a wheelchair for somebody 6 feet tall. Now, how did that work? Now, how did that work? It doesn't work. So I had to complain. And I said, look, man, I appreciate it, but this ain't going to work. And I had to show him. And I had to go around with that chair for a while because you know how hard it is with agencies. So I had to wait, but I had to complain and I had to do it patiently. By patient, I had letters written. I had my doctor write a letter. I had my friends write letters. And do you know those things got read? And people responded. And they responded positively. See? And that's, if you're upset about something, it's fine. But let's put it toward the positive way. Let's let people know what we need and say it. Like the 28-day sit-in. Man, I imagine people's having problems trying to get around all them wheelchairs and stuff. Man, what's going on? And they ask and so, hey, now what? We do have buses. See? So that's what I'm saying. We can do stuff very constructive. And that's what the advisory committees in our county, Solano County, is. I like it. I'm telling you, I enjoy being on it. I enjoy being the chair. And being the chairperson, you can kind of guide the conversation. And because they see me on a regular basis, they always aware that, hey, people with disabilities need to be heard. And that's what it is. We need to be heard. You know, that's what voting is for. If you don't vote, you can't say too much. But if you vote, then your voice has been heard and you can say that you do not like it, okay? Or what you can do to help it. But that's pretty much all I have to say about it. If you have any questions, now I can give you some other things, to, you know, about other cases where riding in, okay, I'm gonna give you another story. This is a good one. I worked at Napa State Hospital, and this is the way the buses run. It's a 10-minute ride by car. It's an hour ride by bus, okay? Now, I used to have to be at work at 8 o'clock in the morning. Was it 8? Yeah, 8 o'clock in the morning. I would get up, go out the house. Now, the bus did not pick me up at the house. I had to go to the bus stop, which is about, I'm trying to see, about 7, 8 blocks from here. I would make it there sometime, and guess what? I made it late. So I would have to make it earlier. So I make it earlier. But then, and the weather gets cold, now I'm out in the bad weather, in the cold, early, waiting on the bus. So that was difficult. But anyway, not to say the least, I still made it to work, made it on time. But one night, I got out of work. I went across the street, and the sun had started setting earlier, so it got darker early. And I'm out there at the stop, by myself. At same stop, same time. And guess what the bus did? Straight on by. You know why? Couldn't see me. But I had the number for their dispatcher, and I actually knew the dispatcher. So when I called, I said, "Hey, the bus left me. He missed me. He couldn't see me." And da da da. And you know what they did? They sent a van to pick me up. And guess what? The van took me right to the door to my house. So I mean, I got a little nice ride out of it, but we got to talking. And then I began to communicate more with them about what I thought would be better for their situation too. Because when you speak up, people want to hear what you got to say. When you speak up and you're friendly and they are and they're aware and they want to help, that's how it works, and that makes the system work. But that's it. That's all I have. That's all I have to say. If anybody got any questions, I'll be glad to answer. And believe me, I've been handling this thing for, I don't want to tell you how old I am, shucks. But I've been around for a while. I've been around since the 60s. So I've seen the changes made. And I like the changes now that are made. And the people that come after me, they got it made way better. And we can make it even better because more people are listening. Just like this group is listening. My group is listening. So it's an open door, and we need more participants because the more voices we got, the more people here. Thank you. And any question? We'll wait on the question and answer time. So if you have any, just send them to me.
Yeah, thanks, Ernest. We've alluded to just the power of personal narrative and anecdote. And so I personally enjoyed the stories. I'd like to hear more actually at some point. But now we're turning to our Q&A portion of the workshop, of the outreach. And there is a little bit of presentation left after the Q&A, so I do encourage folks to stay on after that. But here I encourage people to share their questions in the Q&A box or in the chat. I see a few have been primed, and I think the first one is directed at Annette. I will read it. Has there been something to address the pass-ups of PWDs who are visibly disabled, such as walkers or crutches, but not in wheelchairs? Muni frequently does this.
I can respond to that, Jimin. This is
Marcia. Okay, Marcia.
Yeah, the examples I gave are a very small segment of the issues that were raised. We have hundreds of pages of documenting the complaints and concerns from our participants. So yes, that one was definitely registered as a problem. And this is a good example of getting in touch with the agency. In this case, it looks like Muni, and filing a complaint. Put your voice out there, say this is not acceptable. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. And Annette, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would say the same thing. It's just as important. It doesn't matter what the disability is that someone has. No one should be passed up. I mean, the only time when a pass up would be warranted is if everyone at the stop is being passed up because the bus is so full that it can't, take additional customers. But we're very clear in our training with operators that they really have, when someone has a visible disability, it's even more important to stop and explain, what's going on, why you're going past. And I know that can be difficult because then people try to rush on the bus and there's, it's so packed, you can't get people on. But Bob's absolutely right. It's just as important, no matter what the disability that someone has, that they not be passed up.
Okay. The next question was about the three-wheeled scooters that were discussed in the Golden Gate Park.
Yeah, so the Golden Gate Park is the bicyclist, is the adaptive bikes. The adaptive scooters are throughout the city, and the different companies have different pilots they're doing. I think what Bob had asked was, is it possible to purchase one yourself, that type of scooter? And my understanding is it is, Bob, and I'll get more information for you about the manufacturer, who makes it. But I did come across a guy on the street who had one, and I asked him about it because I wanted to know. And he said it had been really helpful to him. He, it was one that he he owned himself. So I know that they are, you know, available. So I'll try to find out more information for you about who's the manufacturer and how to get a hold of one.
Okay. The next, we have a comment or a link to an article, which is just about the disability community being left behind with vaccinations. So there's a link in the chat that people can link to if they're interested in that article. And beyond that, we don't have any questions, but I'll take a moment here to pause to encourage folks to either within the chat or within the Q&A box to provide any questions for the panelists. Okay, well, there is kind of a blue sky exercise that we're going to have a little bit later in the presentation. So there'll be an opportunity to talk a little bit more, hear more of your kind of ideas and input. But I guess we can resume with the presentation if there's nothing else. Okay, this is a slide about transportation advocacy. As Annette described in her presentation, the Bay Area has a very storied and significant history of independent living activism, which includes transportation. This movement has very much been a bottom-up movement led by activists. And, you know, it's a challenge, but it's important to recognize that civil rights at the government level does not have a watchdog role and is generally complaint-driven. And so that, unfortunately, at times is the role of the public to be rabble-rousers, to remind people of the challenges that they experience in their lives. Decision makers are not off the hook. We need to hold their feet to the fire, so to speak. And there are various channels through which advocacy can be implemented. Making comments at public meetings, making formal complaints, engaging the media to put pressure on decision makers. And as we heard from Ernest, the power of individual narratives can be very powerful for decision makers to hear. For example, describing what it's like to transfer between paratransit systems for many folks on the presentation now. People assume it's like a bus transfer, but we know it's a lot more difficult. And that sharing personal stories can really convey the challenge of these experiences. It's good to be involved generally, get connected, to develop relationships with transportation agency staff to better understand the legal and financial landscape. Such relationships could be helpful in understanding what's in the realm of possible. You know, we're all dealing with a lot of varied constraints, and you know, it's good to have our eye on the prize, but it's also good to be aware of what are the challenges that we're confronted with. There are conflicting priorities, budgeting and staffing constraints. Good to be vigilant, to be aware of these, but to continue to march through them. And then lastly, I want to underscore the importance of connecting directly with elected officials. They do represent you. It's important that they hear from you early and often, and you continue to be engaged with them. And then I think Marcia is going to take this slide.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay, this is a little opportunity for us to share hopes and dreams. We will collect these. David is suggesting that we allow participants to speak. We are in the webinar version of Zoom, and I would have to confer with my colleagues about doing that. There is a way, but I'm not sure how to do it myself.
If attendees want to raise their hand, I can unmute you.
Yeah, David says some people are on the phone. So, you know, I mean, what I vaguely remember about Zoom is you can go to the participant list and enable them to talk. Kat, are you aware of how to do that?
One person on the phone, but they're in a listener mode.
Yeah.
Right.
Speak, but we have to know who has that interest.
Well, I'm presuming it's David. So, but, okay, let's go ahead with the exercise for people who have access to chat, and then we're gonna see if we can get David's participation. Okay, so the question for consideration is, what would you imagine if you had, for example, $100,000, or if you had $10 million? What in your wildest imagination is options, resources, vehicles, services that you would like to see? And this is a sky's the limit kind of exercise. So, you know, including time travel or whatever, we want to open up the box, outside the box thinking, to share our creativity, and we will post these if you want on the website, or just for discussion right now. So take a few minutes and go for it. Share your thoughts in the chat. And is there a way to enable David or somebody on the phone to speak? Somebody else's phone, or somehow get David. Oh, he is joined. David is on Zoom.
You'll have to unmute yourself, David. Or maybe we can unmute you.
David,
Okay.
can you unmute?
Yeah, okay. Sorry, my voiceover is speaking on my iPhone at the same time. I had to look for the mute button. I don't exactly remember what, I had a number of questions, but I feel as if, you know, we know how to advocate. And frankly, with all due respect, and I want to give Annette credit where credit is due, I think that Muni has made much more progress than many other transit agencies. And I think that's partly due to such staunch advocates as Roland Wong and the late lamented Jewel McGinnis, who many of us miss terribly. But I also want to say that we know how to advocate. We know what we need. And a number of us are organizing a coalition of transit dependent riders because we feel that transit agencies haven't paid enough attention to us. Those of us who are captive, we have no choice but to use public transit. We can't use the bicycles and scooters that you mentioned, Annette, those of us who are blind, for instance. Someday there will be autonomous vehicles, and that will be very nice, and we'll be able to drive or be driven. And so we have a lot to look forward to, and we hope that we can work in partnership with all of the transit agencies in the Bay Area. And I want to say one more quick thing. I represent the American Council of the Blind. I've just been appointed to their transportation committee, and we have been talking about calling for the complete restructuring of ADA paratransit, that it must become same-day service, and it must be linked not to the availability of fixed route transit, but rather to the inability to drive. So I just want to prepare you for that eventuality. We don't know when we're going to bring this up, maybe next year, but I know that it will be coming up soon. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, David. And very good news that you're organizing in that way. And we will post the contact information on our website. So we'll be in touch about that.
So, Marcia, as people post to the chat or to the Q&A, do we want to read people's responses out loud?
Yeah, and looks like it's not forthcoming.
If you open the chat, there are two. I see.
Oh, okay, I see. I would like to see spontaneous accessible transportation options. Yes. And Richard Gallo, 24-hour accessible transportation for seniors and people with disabilities, just like everybody else. Excellent. Any others forthcoming?
I have unmuted Jenna.
Hello, Jenna.
Yes, hello, Marta, hello, everyone. I wanted to make one comment with regard to the desire for things that are done on behalf of accessibility to also be, whenever possible, very labor progressive. And it seems once again that the TNCs, which really gets down to the duopoly, except for tiny little markets, we're looking to them. And I think that access fee, I've been paying it. It's nice to know that it hasn't all been used, but I want us, as we build the system of our dreams where there's integration, to also appreciate that as we expand same-day service and on-demand for all of the people who need these many forms of transit, that we try to find ways to incorporate the existing labor pool and even the vehicular pool of accessible vans and getting more appropriate vehicles for the job. Because I would hate for us to not ever use unionized labor. I just want to make a pitch for keeping that right there front and center. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Excellent point. And someone is commenting, $10 million. Yeah, question mark, rethink. Okay, the suggestion is rethink and develop prototype accessible buses in all lengths, but not stick to the standard dimensions. Okay, make door entry maximum feasible and not minimally feasible. Then tour them around the Bay Area first, making sample passenger trips to each transportation agency, to MTC, to county transportation authorities. Then go to nearby metro areas, seek production funding. Whoops. Oh wait, I lost the visibility here. Statement. Seek production funding from Caltrans as well as US FTA, Federal Transportation Authority. Yeah, this is nothing about us without us. So lovely specific suggestions about how to include maximal input from the community most effective. Thank you. And Justina from Krill is agreeing with something that Drennan said. Spontaneous accessible transportation. I'd also love for people with disabilities not to have to jump through hoops in order to apply for the programs and services. Yes. It doesn't make sense that a person whose transportation options are limited should have to figure out transportation to apply to participate and get a discount, etc. card applications for paratransit. Excellent point. Yeah, the hoops are absurd. These are good. Lori to all panelists. Oh, Lori was kicked off Zoom and it, Lori, are you back?
I took care of it.
Oh, okay, thank you, Jenny. And someone is saying, require
Could
more...
I address, Marcia, could I just address that comment about ETC? Because I think that's a really good comment. And it was one of the things we were concerned about when we started the program. So we tried to make it as easy as possible. All someone had to do was call 311 and then they were transferred, 311 saying, I need this, program, which we advertised around at all the bus stops and tried to get out through social service agencies in any ways we could. And then they would be transferred from that call directly to paratransit, where they would do the intake over the phone. So they didn't have to send anything in, and then they would be you know, registered for the card, and the card would be sent to them. And we gave them time to send their verification if it was, you know, a driver's license or whatever to prove their age. So we were really cognizant of that and realizing, hey, people need this quickly. They need it easily. They need to not have to go through a lot of hoops to make it happen. So that was something that we took into consideration.
Good, thank you, Annette. Excellent. Okay, the next one is require more transit-only lanes and transit agencies to use all carpool/bus-only lanes, such that any express bus trip is no more than 2 times the time it takes for a car to commute. So transit becomes somewhat time competitive with autos. Okay, good suggestion. And raise fines for traveling in bus lanes and for parking in bus zones. Then use the local share of those fines to buy more ramp taxis and paratransit vans. Okay, so thinking budget.
Could I mention one other thing about that? One of the things that we've been trying to do at the state level is to get the state to allow us to issue tickets for cars driving in the transit only lanes, you know, similar to red light running tickets. And that's been, you know, a steep endeavor so far. But I think that's one place where advocacy could help, you know, is getting the state legislature to understand how important it is to keep those transit lanes open so that they could be there for people who are on transit. And, you know, enforcement is always important to making things happen. And so if you have easier enforcement methods, then, you know, it's more likely to happen.
Good, thank you, Annette. And hi back, Justina. Okay, I'm guessing that's all of the brainstorm suggestions for now. So we can proceed.
Okay, good. Those were some good things to hear from y'all. So we are just about the end of our time together today. And while this TRACS project is coming to a close, it doesn't mean that the conversation has to end. Later this week, we're going to send out this presentation to you, as well as a list of the attendees who registered for today. If you don't want to be included on that list, please let us know by Friday that you want to opt out. You can just send me an email and we won't include your name and email address. But in the coming weeks, we will also be publishing all of our TRACS documents and additional resources on the WID website to help you with your transportation advocacy. We don't want you to stop there. We want to issue a challenge to you today. David mentioned that lots of you are transportation advocates, but some of you aren't. It's what we heard during our research. Some of you are new to advocacy and you're frustrated with the system. So our challenge is this. In the next month or so, we'd like you to deliver a public comment at a transportation agency meeting or at an MTC meeting. Write your experience down and email it in, or attend one of those virtual public meetings and raise your virtual hand to make your comment. We want you to tell the decision makers about the transportation problems you're facing. Last week, we issued a similar challenge to our colleagues at the transportation agencies. We asked them to reach out to a disabled member of their agency advisory board or to their local independent living resource center. We asked them to be more deliberate about creating relationships with the disability community so that they could better include disability perspectives in their work. We told them that reaching out and doing this is not going to be easy. And I'm going to say that to you today. If you're not used to giving public comment, it'll be a challenge and it may feel scary, but we really need all of our voices at these meetings in order to make transportation systems more accessible to everyone. So we'll go on to the next slide. And I have, like I said, we will email this out, and many of you already have this presentation, but you'll have our contact information there. I want to thank you all for being with us today. And again, in the coming weeks, we're going to follow up and provide our presentation and let you know when all of the TRACS documents are up on the website. Again, tell us by Friday if you do not want your information shared. But I do want to say thanks for your time today, and thank you for being here with us, and thank you for your continued advocacy.
And just to mention, Bob Planthold is asking, can we share the subgroups and connecting with those for people who may not know of them. And on the website, there will be a county by county listing of how to connect with those groups. So it'll be available. But thanks for asking. And again, thanks for everybody's participation. We appreciate your commitment, and please continue the conversation, as Drennan has said. Take care, everybody.